Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to InsideAIR, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hi, I'm Flight Lieutenant Chris Sully, and welcome to the latest RAF InsideAIR podcast. In this episode, we're talking Counter Uncrewed Aerial Systems, or CUAS. What are they? How does it work? And who makes up the team behind it all?
Especially when we're working in the UK in support of other government departments. We do lots of MACAs, so military aids and civil authority. So every major public event, pretty much for the last 3 or 4 years, has had 2 Counter UAS wing providing that counter drone cover. Basically, an interesting note on some of our systems, the human-machine interface of the system works from a modified PlayStation controller. Reason for that, so the generations we've got coming through now and previously are used to using those. That workforce is absolutely key to operate. It's really workforce intensive. We talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning and so forth. There is some capability there. It's still being developed. So at the moment, you're still reliant on that human in the loop.
As usual, we'll also reheat some stories which could have slipped under your radar, and we'll be finding out who's under the hat, as usual, with AS1 Ben Russell.
Hardest part of your job?
Hardest part of my job is having to work out for myself when people are having difficulty understanding concepts that they're a little bit embarrassed about talking about, and trying to find ways by which I get around that and help them in their learning journey.
Welcome to Inside Air. In this episode, we're talking CUAS, Counter Uncrewed Aerial Systems. What are they? What does it all mean? How does it fit in? Hopefully the man that can tell us a bit more about it all is Sqn Ldr Dan Quayle, the OC of Training and Standards at RAF Leeming. Dan, welcome to Inside Air. Tell us a bit, first of all, about your RAF career so far.
Okay, Chris, so I've been in the Royal Air Force for a long time, since 1998, all within the RAF Regiment. Since that time, I've done a number of sort of routine RAF Regiment force protection roles and sort of more specialised roles, particularly doing specialist counter CBRN, so chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear, and also sort of wider defence roles and international deployments with the UK forces, and just recently finished a tour with the United Nations in Somalia.
We're going to be talking lots about the systems and the units that are used and everything, the equipment that you use. Counter Uncrewed Aerial Systems, not aircraft systems. We don't want to upset anyone. When did you first sort of become aware of them in your RAF career, and what was it that made you think, oh, this is something a bit different?
So on a previous tour, quite a few turns of the wheel ago, I became the Chief of Staff on number 8 RAF Force Protection Wing. Part of that wing was a small unit called the Defence Warning and Reporting Flight, which had its genesis in the 2012 Olympics. And it was basically a small group of RAF Regiment personnel that were working under a project that the RAF was working on, sort of developing counter-drone technology. And like I said, its first use or first run out in an experimental capacity really was provide support in the policing security role for the 2012 Olympics. They fell under me as the Chief of Staff. Then I went on to do other things, and then I got a chance to come back in when number 2 Force Protection Wing, as it was then, doing a normal RAF Regiment Force Protection role, re-rolled to Counter UAS in 2022. I've been doing that ever since.
And that was a really high-profile thing, because obviously the London Olympics, the attention of the world was on that. That must have been quite a precious few months, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, the team, a really small team, only numbered about 5 or 6. National standby helicopters flew into RAF Waddington, as it was then, lifted the teams down there and worked alongside the RAF Regiment's other assets down there doing helicopter sniping, and then sort of proved the capability of those early systems, which have evolved massively since those times.
And you mentioned that, we'll come on to that in a moment. You've dropped the D word already, and I'm going to ask you, because obviously people that are involved in this, sometimes if you use drone, get upset about this. What is the thinking on the phraseology now?
Right, so there's a number of terms. What we talk about is Counter UAS, so Counter Uncrewed Aerial Systems. So that's one term. Again, other people refer to them as uncrewed aerial systems. Some people call them remotely piloted air systems. And generically, it's easier, and for the general public, just to use drones, because I think everyone understands what a drone is. So in effect, what we do is counter drone activity.
I was going to say, so when we talk about the Counter Uncrewed Aircraft Systems, what exactly are we talking about? What systems does it involve, and what's the role? What's the aim that you have?
So, I mean, the drones that we are aiming to counter have, as you can imagine, you've seen the press, TikTok, everywhere else. They've evolved massively from very early on, almost toys, sort of the rotary wing, small commercial stuff that you could buy on Amazon and various other places. They've developed in technology and uses. Again, all still available commercial, those small rotary wings and some sort of larger fixed wing platforms that are used for all sorts of uses, from Amazon drop-offs for surveying of ground, aerial photography, a million different uses. So there's those type of drones, which again are a problem because people use them, sometimes not knowing the rules, sometimes maliciously. And then we move further on to that, where we've got sort of modified those drones, or DIY, so people have built them themselves. And that's where you start to see the first person view drones, which again, people have seen footage from Ukraine of unfortunate Russian and Ukrainian soldiers getting chased by these FPVs and hit. And then we go further down the line where you start looking more towards the sort of state-sponsored drones. So larger, whether they're rotary wing or fixed wing. And again, people will have seen footage of the Shahis, like a small delta wing, and they're basically used as one-way attack drones, again, used by the Iranians, used heavily in the Ukraine conflict. So it's the whole gambit. What we do not do is counter the absolute high-end, high-altitude drones like you see with that we use, the US use, and other nations use. So they're really a much more high altitude, and that becomes a normal counter-air sort of role that we do not do.
If we wind the clock back just for a moment to 2012 and when you were working at the London Olympics, could you have imagined with the team you were working with then just how far and how quickly things have developed?
No, I mean, the expansion of drones across the world and within the UK has happened exponentially, is huge. And that's been driven largely by conflict, mainly Ukraine and stuff that's been happening in the Middle East. But also, obviously, the commercial uses of these drones and how easily they are available and how easily they are to operate. So, yeah, it's grown massively. Is it a surprise? Not really. I mean, those early days, 2012, very early days from that. But the big changing point for everybody around the world really was the use of drones by Extinction Rebellion in 2018, 2019 around London Heathrow and Gatwick, which we were involved in trying to counter. That was the big turning point for everyone in the sort of counter UAS role.
And in terms of the acceptance within defence as a bigger picture, I presume now we're at the stage where we know that drones and uncrewed aircraft systems are very much going to be part of any potential conflict or any situation we're involved with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's clear from what you see through open source and through the media. A big turning point for sort of UK defence was in, I think, 2019, 2020, where the Commander of Joint Operations, so basically the lead for all UK operations overseas, basically stated that drones were one of the biggest threats to life for our personnel overseas. So that was a big turning point in UK defence.
And certainly when we put social media on or you watch the news, you can just see how much of an impact they're having, excuse the expression, in Ukraine in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's clearly available, open source. People see from those one-way attack drones used by both Ukraine and Russia hitting vital infrastructure, all the way down to use of small drones, whether in sort of surveillance mode or in almost as a suicide role, chasing down troops using the FPVs, those first-person view drones that I mentioned before. Loads and loads of footage on that. And there was really good coverage of the Iranian attack on Israel last year, maybe a bit longer ago now, where you had the drones coming across as part of integrated with ballistic missiles and everything else. It's a clear threat. It's not going to go away. It's only going to increase.
Within the constraints of security and what you're able to talk about, what equipment does the wing actually use? What are the capabilities?
So basically, we've got our equipment can be split down the middle, really. One side of the house is a system called AUKUS, which again is open source and has been reported. And that primarily is a radar-based electronic warfare system. So that does the full gambit. We talk about DTID, so detect, track, identify, and defeat. So AUKUS uses a radar, or we have a number of radars depending on what capability is required. That's the primary form of detection. We have other systems within that AUKUS suite. One is a radio frequency detection finder, very similar. We've had this since the Second World War and earlier. Obviously, this is more advanced, so it picks up radio frequencies and gives you direction, geolocates a drone. So they are primary forms of detection. It has a camera system, ultra long range camera system, works with thermal imaging and daylight camera. And from what I've seen from other nations, I think we've pretty much got the world leading one. Really, really capable system. So that allows the troops to actually identify what the radar and other systems have picked up. So really key part of that positive identification before we take any action. And also used for evidential purposes, so we can record. And then the final element of that AUKUS system is basically a jammer. We have a big electronic warfare jammer. So that basically just blocks the signal between the controller and the drone, or from between the drone and satellite functions. So that's the primary EW side. We also have a system that works on a library-based system. So that can work independently. There's many systems like it around the world. Really good system, but will only work against those drones that are in its library. So that's its limitation. And that provides mitigation by itself. It gives you a number of options. Basically, it works. You're almost taking over the role of controller. It says to the drone, listen to me, don't listen to your controller, so we can take control. But like I said, it's library based, so it has to be in that library and effective against most commercial off-the-shelf stuff available. So that's one part of the house, and that's the bit that's deployed pretty much all over the world. We've deployed it within the UK, and we've had it deployed on an enduring basis in the Middle East for a long time. The other side, which its primary role is against those larger one-way attack drones, is another system, Rapid Sentry, which fires a missile. As you can probably appreciate, if you try and jam a one-way attack missile, it just potentially just carries on because it's acting like a plane, it'll glide. So you need to take sort of affirmative action. So that's our other piece of equipment that is actually a missile system that will shoot the drone out the sky.
Because we saw this is very much a game of cat and mouse, because you develop countermeasures and then opponents will develop new systems. We've seen in Ukraine, for example, almost like a spider's web of fiber optic wires left over the battlefield, with drones being sort of sent in that way instead. And presumably that's stuff that you've got to keep developing systems for.
Yeah, I mean, our systems have been constantly upgraded since they started to evolve in sort of 2012. And like you said, it's catching up with that emerging threat. You've mentioned the fiber optic drones. They are incredibly hard to jam. There is ways and means. There's other technology available in sort of the commercial side that makes them increasingly hard to jam. So they have other systems that allows them to look at the ground and compare that to an inboard camera. So if you jam them, they'll just carry on their current mission. Again, ways and means to get around that. Technology evolves. There's even drones now are trying to, we call it biomimetics. They're designed to look like something out of nature. So you'll see online in various places, there's small drones now that get developed that look like birds. There's drones that work underwater and then can transfer from different domains. So a drone can come from underneath the water, pop out through the water, fly into the sky, and do the same in reverse, which again makes them quite hard to detect. I mean, it only goes as far as human ingenuity, but we've got to try and keep pace with that. So we have to upgrade our systems, whether hardware or software, as and when money and capability is available.
And also, hardware and software is one thing, but the people are the important part of the equation. You're very much involved in the training. So most of the people you have working with the wing come from a force protection background?
Yeah, absolutely. The workforce that we have is key to the capability. Like I said, we've worked with many other nations. I think we are sort of widely regarded as almost at the forefront of it. Been doing it quite a long time. It's highly specialized, highly complex, and really, really difficult. It takes time to train these people. At the moment, it is pretty much an RAF regiment force protection role. We do have a number of other trades that we've begged, borrowed or stolen from the rest of the Air Force. So from cyber people, engineers, what have you, to try and make the systems work. If you were building this from scratch, you'd pull in those specialists from across the defence. So you had the full gambit. But like I said, that workforce is absolutely key to operate. It's really workforce intensive. We talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so forth. There is some capability there. It's still being developed. So at the moment, you're still relying on that human in the loop, tracking that radar, understanding what it says to them, and being able to make the right decision to carry out the right form of mitigation of that drone.
We're used to seeing the RAF regiment carrying out its force protection roles and training roles and everything else. What makes a good operator? What gives somebody the edge that you'd be looking for to move over to?
Well, I think it's sort of more broadly from a sort of RAF regiment force protection background. We've got people that start their training, they sort of understand that complex air-ground environment. So they're used to working around airfields, complex areas. They understand that airspace, how it interacts with the ground space. So that gives us advantage. Alongside the understanding of that complex air-ground environment, it's useful for the sort of the modern generation. Basically, an interesting note on some of our systems, the human machine interface of the system works from a modified PlayStation controller. Reason for that, so the generations we've got coming through now and previously are used to using those, and in all effects, it looks like a game. They're interacting with radars, they are tracking a target, and they're taking affirmative action with that target. So that's what makes a really good operator, their ability to absorb lots and lots of different information from different systems and make decisions based on their experience and the rules in which we're using the equipment.
PlayStation controllers, on the basis if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I guess.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's something that they understand probably far better than I do, and it makes it easier for somebody to operate the system, and it reduces training time, etc.
And you mentioned training time. What sort of training time does it take to get somebody to come into the wing and to get them fully operational?
So, I mean, currently for the electronic warfare side, we take somebody fresh into the wing. We push them through basically a 4-week intensive basic training course, and that finishes. They do all the theoretical stuff. They do all the practical elements, and that finishes with a practical exercise where we deploy them to electronic warfare range, and they actively track and defeat drones that we fly ourselves. And that's their final push. Once they do that, that's them qualified. We build upon that. So there's other specialist courses just to do the role. So it needs to be sort of working at height, as you appreciate with some of these systems, especially when we're working in the UK in support of other government departments. We do lots of MACAs, so military aids to the civil authority. So every major public event, pretty much for the last 3 or 4 years, has had a 2 Counter UAS wing providing that counter drone cover. So those sensors tend to be put on roofs to allow them line of sight. So we need to do that safely. So they do that. And then we pick the great and good from those teams, and we push them through a 2-week advanced course, which allows them to do sort of more complex sighting, fault finding, configuration, because we test and adjust the sort of threat management configurations for whichever mission they're on. So that's them trained. And then we obviously have instructors on top. On the kinetic side, it looks something similar. So it's sort of 2 to 3 week course, which covers the missile system and the associated radar. And then that culminates in a 2-week missile practice camp where they go to a air defense range and they fire missiles at drones and shoot them out of the sky. And then that's them trained. And then we obviously have continuous training, whether that's at Leeming, other locations, and or doing more and more operations in the UK or overseas.
And training is going to be an ongoing theme because the systems keep developing. You mentioned UK, you mentioned overseas. We'll come to overseas in a moment. Within the UK, what's the main role of the wing? You've touched on some of the areas, but what sort of things are you likely to be doing?
So we're basically aligned to two main roles. So one within the UK is to support defence assets. So there was widespread coverage of drones seen over a year ago down in the southeast. So to counter that, so protecting our own air bases and sites. So we have people on standby to do that. Part of that, although we're not permanently held on standby for, is, like I said, that support to those MACAs, so support to other government departments. So that's drawn from, the phrase is irreducible capacity. So if the police can't do it and we have the capacity, we go and support, like I said, most major events. So the King's coronation, for example, Majesty the Queen's funeral, Eurovision.
Quite a
and
range of things then.
Yeah, and a million different state visits. So we tend to provide a capacity and capability to support the Home Office and the police in those.
You mentioned UK. We talked a little bit earlier on about just how contested the lower airspace is becoming, with Amazon deliveries planned and all sorts of bits and pieces. How do you integrate yourselves in with the team at Sqn? We did a recent Inside Air with the team at Sqn talking about UAS and everything else. Do you have much involvement with them?
Not really. I mean, we sort of monitor how things are developing in terms of how generally crewed, so normal aircraft and uncrewed systems are going to be working together. There is routes within the UK, but the thing to consider within the UK is we're in support of the police. So when we're on UK homeland, we're in direct support for them. So we report into their air cell, and they are responsible for doing that integration, deconfliction with other assets. So I mean that's firmly within sort of UK defence policy that we're in support. So we don't really have to consider that at the moment. When we're deployed an airbase, more often than not, we're deployed alongside or next to our own military air traffic control people. So it's a bit of procedural integration with them to make sure what we're doing is safe, and they understand what we're doing. We understand the air picture as well. So they're not necessarily jamming something next to an aircraft, etc.
But presumably they deal with the deconfliction and clearing the airspace, and you can then get on with the job you're there to do.
Yeah, so I mean, we have a sort of well-developed process now before we deploy. So there is an organisation in the UK called the Defence Electromagnetic Authority. So they provided our clearances to use our radars. So we're not conflicting with other radars, whether military or civilian. And they also give us authority to use our jammer. So we know that we're not going to conflict with other users, or other users are warned that we're going to potentially using jammers. So they're aware why their systems are being affected. So that's within the UK.
We sometimes see things like a NOTAM, a notice to airmen, which will warn other airspace users that there's an area that's going to be restricted, I guess, if you're doing something like a parade or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what sort of those jamming warning messages. So that initiates that notice to airmen, that NOTAM, and informs other users what's going on. So things can be avoided, or people are aware while they're being jammed.
So that's some of the home soil things you get involved with. Toward the end of last year, there were some much publicised deployments for the wing to Belgium and Denmark. What are you able to tell us about those?
Yeah, so that builds on our capability. So it builds upon the sightings of drones in the States, like I said, about 18 months ago, and within the UK. And there's been frequent sightings of drones around various places in Europe, and there's a request from, first off, Copenhagen from the Danes for support. That was supported by the UK MOD, and we deployed a team out there last year. So they basically provided the same capabilities we provide in the UK and overseas. So they deployed with our AUKUS electronic warfare system, only that system, not the kinetic missile system. They basically deploy to the airfields out there and provide that detect, track, identify, and defeat alongside the Danish authorities. So exactly, pretty much a MACA overseas. Such thing doesn't really exist, but it does for us. So it's us working under the authority of the Danes, and then providing our engagement authority. So then providing the authority for us actually to carry out any form of mitigation. And similar thing in Belgium. So again, drone scene, particularly around an airbase where they had their quick reaction alerts, so their aircraft that respond to threats to Belgium. So clearly they were concerned. So we deployed the electronic warfare system out there to support them.
So those were the operations in Belgium and Denmark. The Royal Air Force operating this system is one thing. How do you integrate with what the other services, the Army and maybe the Navy, are up to as well?
So within the Counter UAS world, like I said, following those incidents around Heathrow and Gatwick, the Vice Chief of Defence Staff basically told Defence to get after this problem. Part of that direction was that air would be the lead service for Counter UAS. but particularly in provision of fixed site. So that's what we do. So basically things in place for a time defending a large location like air bases, etc. The further split responsibility, as you can imagine, the army were told to get after and come up with solutions for dismounted, so normal troops, and manoeuvre, so large battle groups, tanks, vehicles, that sort of thing. And then Navy, again, as you'd imagine, they were told to come up with solutions for the sort of maritime and the littoral, so the amphibious, sort of close to the shore activity. So that's all three sides do their thing, and that is coordinated and sort of cohered and brought together by an organisation that works under Air Command, the Joint Counter UAS office, that, like I said, coordinates, coheres, and has connections with other nations. So lots of other nations have or formed their own JCOs and other government departments like the Home Office.
Just flicking back a bit, so we spoke about Belgium and Denmark. I understand you were also involved with the Paris Olympics as well.
Yeah, so 2024 Paris Olympics. So about a year prior to that, the French minister was speaking to the UK Minister of Defence, and they were talking about the problems with that. At that time, the French had no real counter-UAS capability, so the request went out to the Brits. Can you help? Alongside other nations provided other forms of support, and it was agreed that we'd support. So we deployed a team out, again using electronic warfare capability, to provide counter-drone cover for the Olympic Village where all the athletes were staying. So we sat on top of the Olympic Village on the highest buildings throughout the Olympics and the Paralympics. So we had teams out there throughout providing the protection for the athletes. During that, we did a number of mitigations. All were sort of commercial off the shelf, regular rotary wing, so probably nuisance rather than anything more malicious. But we defeated a number of those and basically put those into the hands of the gendarmerie. And to be honest, we don't really know what happened after that. That's French business. But again, we worked under the French authority for that. We had a liaison officer, so myself, I was sat with the French. They had their own kit, but literally they just received the training, so they were a bit behind the drag curve. I'm sure they're far more advanced now. They had very similar capabilities to us, but linked to what we said before, we had the experience. Our kit was well used, and our troops were very experienced. So it was the primary counter-drone protection for the athletes.
And presumably for the team themselves, a great experience to go and see something beyond life at Leeming and other air bases.
Absolutely. They were sat on top of buildings looking at all the athletes walking around the village. They did get the opportunity to go to some events, which was great. Yeah, I think all had a good time.
We've spoken a lot about the equipment. We've touched on how important the people still are and are likely to be going forward. Another leg of the, if you like, the things that make everything work in a joint forces world and a joined up forces world is industry partners. You have got to be pretty much at the forefront of that kind of thing.
Absolutely. The other hat that I wear within the wing is I sort of run our operational evaluation unit. So again, a small team of sort of deeper subject matter experts that work very closely with industry. They support trials of new equipment, and then they develop our tactics, techniques and procedures and feed that to the rest of the wing. So on the electronic warfare side, they work very closely with Leonardo UK, who's the prime contractor for our electronic warfare equipment. So we're in contact with them on a daily, weekly basis. They're constantly providing upgrades of software and further upgrades, as like I said, as money allows. They also provide us field service representatives that are able to deploy and fix any problems we have. Unfortunately, a lot of those are ex-RAF regiment that have been poached by industry, so we all know each other. And like I said, we work very, very closely with them, and they're a very forward-leaning organisation. Within their contract, there's a number of subcontractors, again, that we deal with. And then on the missile side, the main contract for that is Thales and Saab that make some of the radars. And again, similar relationship. They provide that deeper engineering support. They provide those developments, and they provide that initial training to our instructors for us to change that into more usable training material for our personnel.
Linking those two things up again, we spoke about industry, we've spoken about the people. You touched on the fact as well that a lot of the people in industry are ex-RAF regiment, presumably working in the roles that your team are working in makes them very, very employable when their RAF careers come to an end.
Absolutely. They have a number of skills which are in high demand. And as we said before, drones and counter-drone technology and capability is in massive growth. So part of my battle is trying to retain my people and stop the industry poaching them. But from a personal level for them, they've developed some sort of deep, really marketable skills that are very, very useful within the defence industry, which within Counter UAS is growing massively.
Fabulous. Squadron Leader Dan Quayle, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to InsideAIR today.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Chris. Thanks.
I'm AS1 Emma Kerwin, and this is Reheat, where we take a look at some of the RAF stories you might have missed. 3 mobile catering squadron out at RAF Wittering are preparing to deploy on Operation Biloxi. It's a NATO-enhanced air policing mission aiming to preserve the security of Allied skies. They will cater for 230 personnel over a 6-month operation, serving around 150,000 meals. RAF Typhoons have been demonstrating their capability in Saudi Arabia. The RAF jet's been taking part in exercise Spears of Victory 2026, one of the largest multinational air exercises in the Middle East. It's hosted by the Saudi Defence Ministry at the Air Warfare Centre in the kingdom's eastern province. Exercise Red Flag, known as the world's toughest air combat trainings, wrapped up in the United States. 150 aircraft from 3 countries came together for it. 8 Typhoons and a Voyager aircraft were deployed, as well as RAF personnel. The annual training simulates enemy fighter aircraft, space-based elements, and even cyber attacks. And the draw has been made for the semi-finals of the 2026 RAF Football Challenge Cup. 2025 plate winners RAF Odeon will face Brides Norton if they can beat Leeming. RAF Wittering will play either RAF Marham or Waddington for a place in the final. That's due to take place on the 21st of May. That was Reheat for InsideAIR.
Thanks, Emma. And now it's time to find out who's under the hat with Ben.
I'm AS1 Ben Russell, and this is Under the Hat, where we get to know an aviator in less than a minute. Name you're known by.
Hi, I'm Sqn Ldr Dan Quayle and known as Brabs throughout a chunk of my career.
What's your profession?
I am an RAF regiment officer and I'm currently based at the Defence Academy at Sqn.
What's the best thing about your job?
Best thing about my job is the fact that I get lots of new squadron leaders coming in on the Bravo course, lots of slightly older squadron leaders coming in on the Charlie course when they're close to promotion, and that has helped to keep me active and interested.
Hardest part of your job?
Hardest part of my job is having to work out for myself when people are having difficulty understanding concepts that they're a little bit embarrassed about talking about, and trying to find ways by which I get around that and help them in their learning journey.
Best location you've served?
Way back when I was much younger, RAF Catterick, a beautiful station and also in a beautiful part of the world and full of rocks.
What bit of luxury kit do you never deploy without?
An umbrella, folding umbrella to put in your Bergen. It's easy to sit in a trench in the rain or to try and give orders, but an umbrella can be used for just about everything.
And what's your proudest moment in the RAF?
Having the privilege of being responsible for recruit training at the RAF Regiment Depot as OCRTSB. Great NCOs and officers to work with, and now good luck to all of them.
And that's it for another episode of InsideAIR. Please give us a review, subscribe via your favourite podcast app, and then join us again soon.
You've been listening to InsideAIR, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. InsideAIR is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.